Wife threw his wedding ring into the ocean and said, "Finally free." What washed up on shore 6 months later changed her life forever. "Finally free," Claire Donovan whispered as she hurled the gold wedding band into the churning Pacific waves. The ring caught the afternoon sunlight for one brief moment before disappearing into the dark water below. "Finally free from your pathetic dreams and your worthless ambitions." Those were the last words she said to her husband Nathan before walking away from their marriage, their vows, and the man who had loved her completely for 7 years. She had no idea that the ocean keeps its secrets until it's ready to reveal them, and that 6 months later, the entire world would witness the moment her cruelty washed back to shore. What happened next will make you believe in cosmic justice. Viewers, have you ever thrown something away in anger, only to regret it later? What would you do if the universe gave you front row seats to your own karma? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The beach house stood weathered and salt-stained at the edge of Monterey, its wooden deck creaking under the weight of 15 years of Pacific storms. Nathan Reeves had rented it for the weekend, hoping the sound of waves might remind Claire why they'd fallen in love in the first place. They'd met at this very beach, both graduate students escaping the pressure of final exams. She'd been collecting sea glass. He'd been cataloging tide pools for his marine biology thesis. 7 years of marriage later, that young couple felt like strangers to the people they'd become. Nathan stood at the deck railing, watching pelicans dive for fish in the afternoon light. His hands gripped the weathered wood, knuckles white with tension. Inside the beach house, he could hear Claire on the phone, her voice sharp with the tone she reserved for conversations she didn't want him to overhear. "I'm telling you, Monica, I can't do this anymore," Claire said, her words drifting through the open window. 3 more years of waiting for him to give up on this ridiculous research project? 3 more years of living on a researcher's salary while he chases fairy tales in the ocean? Nathan closed his eyes. He knew this conversation by heart. They'd been having versions of it for 2 years. Ever since he'd turned down the corporate position at the aquarium to continue his independent research on deep-sea coral regeneration, the job would have tripled his salary. It also would have ended his life's work. "Brandon says he can get me into his real estate firm," Claire continued. "Partner track within a year. Can you imagine? Me, finally making the money I deserve, with a man who actually has ambition." Brandon Steele. Nathan had met him once at a faculty mixer. Tall, confident, with the kind of easy charm that came from never having to struggle for anything. The way Claire's eyes had lit up when Brandon described his latest development project had told Nathan everything he needed to know about where her heart had drifted. The screen door slammed. Claire stepped onto the deck wearing white linen pants and a blue silk blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked beautiful and cold, like a marble statue. "We need to talk," she said. "I heard your phone call." Her jaw tightened. "Then you know where this is going." Nathan turned to face her fully. "Claire, please. The research grant proposal is due next month. If we get funding, everything changes. 5 years of work is about to pay off." 5 years, she repeated, her voice rising. 5 years of you disappearing for weeks at a time on that decrepit research vessel. 5 years of me explaining to my friends why my husband chooses to study coral instead of making a real living. 5 years of watching you throw away your potential for something that will never matter. It matters to me. That's the problem, Nathan. Nothing else matters to you. Not me, not our future, not the life we could have if you'd just stop being so stubborn. The words hung between them, heavy as storm clouds. Nathan felt something break inside his chest, something that had been cracking slowly for months. "I met someone," Claire said quietly. "Someone who sees a future beyond saltwater and research grants. Brandon. Yes. No shame, no apology, just simple confirmation. He's offered me everything you can't. Stability, success, a real life." Nathan swallowed hard. "How long? Does it matter? How long, Claire?" She met his eyes without flinching. 4 months. We've been seeing each other for 4 months. The number hit him like a physical blow. 4 months of lies. 4 months of coming home to a wife who was already gone, planning her exit while he believed they were just going through a rough patch. I want a divorce, Claire said. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Given your salary and our lack of significant assets, it should be straightforward. Nathan looked at this woman he'd loved since they were 23, this woman he'd built his life around, and realized he was staring at a stranger. The Claire who used to wake up early to watch sunrise over the bay, who'd celebrated his first published paper like he'd won the Nobel Prize, who'd promised to support his dreams no matter what had vanished somewhere along the way, replaced by someone who measured love in dollar signs. The ring, he said quietly, looking down at the gold band on his left hand. It had belonged to his grandfather, passed down through 3 generations. I'd like to keep it. It's the only thing I have from my family. Claire's laugh was sharp and bitter. The ring that cost nothing and means nothing? That cheap piece of metal is perfect for you, Nathan. All sentimental value and no actual worth. She crossed the deck in 3 quick strides and grabbed his hand. Before he could react, she yanked the ring from his finger with enough force to scrape his skin. Nathan's hand shot out to stop her, but she was already at the railing. Finally free, she said, her voice carrying across the empty beach. She drew her arm back and hurled the ring into the ocean with all her strength. The gold band arced through the air, caught the afternoon sun in a flash of light, then disappeared into the dark water below. Finally free from your pathetic dreams and your worthless ambitions. Nathan stood frozen, watching the spot where the ring had entered the water. The waves continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to the small tragedy playing out on the weathered deck. Claire pulled off her own wedding band and tossed it onto the deck at his feet. You can keep mine if you want. Consider it a souvenir of the biggest mistake of my life. She walked past him without another word, her footsteps hollow on the wooden planks. Nathan heard her gathering her things inside the beach house, the zip of her suitcase, the jingle of car keys. The engine of her Mercedes started with a purr that cost more than 3 months of his salary. Gravel crunched under expensive tires as she drove away from their marriage, their history, their shared life. Nathan stood alone on the deck until the sun began to set, painting the ocean in shades of gold and red. Somewhere beneath those waves lay his grandfather's ring, already being carried by currents he'd spent years studying, already beginning its journey through the vast underwater world that Claire had never understood was his calling, not his hobby. He bent down and picked up her discarded ring. It felt weightless in his palm, a circle of gold that had promised forever and delivered 4 months of lies. He slipped it into his pocket and walked down to the beach, his feet sinking into the cool sand. The waves whispered secrets, as they had for millions of years. Nathan had spent his adult life learning to listen to those whispers, understanding the language of tides and currents, the hidden paths that connected every drop of water in the vast Pacific. He knew exactly where the currents would carry his grandfather's ring. He'd mapped these waters for 5 years, documented every thermal layer, every underwater canyon, every secret pathway through the deep. His research wasn't about coral regeneration, though that was part of it. His real work, the project that consumed his every waking thought, was something far more significant, something that would change marine biology forever, something that Claire had dismissed as fairy tales and wasted potential. Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Marcus, it's Nathan. I know it's late, but I need to move up the timeline. How soon can we get the submersible ready? Marcus Thompson, his research partner, and the only person who fully understood the scope of their work, was quiet for a moment. The new sonar array just came in. We could be operational in 2 weeks. But Nathan, the grant proposal. Forget the grant, Nathan said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. We're doing this now. I'll fund it myself if I have to. What happened? Nathan looked out at the darkening ocean, at the place where his marriage had ended and something else was about to begin. I got free. 2 weeks later, the research vessel Meridian cut through morning fog 15 miles off the Monterey coast. The ship was small, barely 60 feet long, with more rust than paint on her hull. But beneath the weathered exterior, she carried some of the most sophisticated deep-sea research equipment in private hands. Equipment Nathan had spent 5 years building, testing, and perfecting, while Claire complained about the cost. Marcus stood at the helm, his dark hair whipping in the wind. At 52, he was 20 years older than Nathan, a former Navy oceanographer who'd given up a comfortable retirement to chase what everyone else called impossible. "Sonar's picking up something," Marcus called out. "Right where you said it would be." Nathan joined him at the control panel, studying the screen that showed the ocean floor 3,000 feet below. The underwater canyon system he'd been mapping for years stretched out in digital clarity, its walls dotted with something that made his heart race. "There," Nathan pointed. "See the thermal signatures?" Marcus leaned closer. "I'll be damned. They're everywhere. Not just everywhere. They're thriving. Growing. The entire canyon system is alive with them." What they were was something that shouldn't exist according to every marine biology textbook ever written. Deep-sea coral that could regenerate from complete destruction. Coral that produced compounds with potential applications in human medicine. Coral that might hold the key to understanding how life adapted to extreme environments. Nathan had discovered the first specimen 4 years ago, collected it against every regulation, and spent 3 years proving it was real. The scientific community had called him a fraud. Claire had called him obsessed. Only Marcus had believed. "Ready to go down?" Marcus asked. Nathan nodded. The submersible was a 2-person sphere of titanium and acrylic designed for depths that would crush a normal human body in seconds. It had cost Nathan his entire savings, 3 mortgages, and any chance of financial stability. Claire had been furious when she'd found out. She'd called it throwing money into the ocean. She hadn't been entirely wrong. 4 hours later, Nathan sat in the cramped submersible, watching the world above fade from blue to black. Marcus handled the controls with practiced ease, guiding them down the underwater canyon wall, while Nathan operated the cameras that would document everything they found. "Temperature's dropping fast," Marcus said. "We're entering the thermal zone." The submersible's lights cut through darkness, illuminating a world that few humans had ever witnessed. And then Nathan saw them. Thousands of them. Coral formations that glowed with bioluminescent light, creating an underwater garden that looked like something from a fairy tale. They covered the canyon walls in cascading towers of impossible color, pulsing with life in the frigid darkness. "Get every angle," Nathan breathed. "Every single angle." Marcus maneuvered the submersible slowly, carefully, while Nathan's cameras captured footage that would rewrite marine biology textbooks. But it was when they reached the canyon floor that Nathan saw something that made him forget to breathe. Nestled in a coral formation, glinting in the submersible's lights, was a ring, his grandfather's ring. The gold band had traveled 15 miles on ocean currents, sunk 3,000 feet, and landed in the exact location where Nathan's life's work lived and thrived. "You seeing this?" Marcus whispered. Nathan couldn't speak. The probability of this happening was astronomical. But here it was, his past and his future intertwined in 3,000 feet of water, witnessed only by coral that glowed with secrets the world wasn't ready to understand. "Bring us closer," Nathan finally managed. "We need to document this." The submersible's robotic arm extended slowly, carefully, and retrieved the ring from its coral cradle. As Nathan held it in his gloved hand, Marcus was already recording everything, already understanding that this moment was bigger than either of them. "This is going to be the story," Marcus said quietly. "Not just the coral. The symbolism is perfect." Nathan looked at the ring, at the coral formations surrounding them, at the proof of 5 years of faith and sacrifice. Claire had thrown away his grandfather's legacy, his family's history, believing it was worthless. The ocean had delivered it to the most important discovery of his career. 6 months. That's how long it took for the footage to be authenticated, peer-reviewed, and published simultaneously in 3 major scientific journals. 6 months for the story to spread through the scientific community like wildfire. 6 months for Nathan Reeves to go from being dismissed as a fraud to being called a visionary. The day the news broke, Nathan was in his small apartment above a coffee shop in Monterey, reviewing the final edits on the documentary that Marcus had been producing. The footage was stunning. The coral formations, the bioluminescent displays, the robotic arm retrieving a gold wedding band from 3,000 feet down, while the narrator explained the impossible journey that had brought it there. His phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. First the Washington Post, then Nature magazine, then CNN. By noon, he'd been offered 3 university positions, 2 book deals, and a research grant that was more money than he'd made in his entire career. "You need to see this," Marcus said, bursting into the apartment with his laptop. The video just went viral, 3 million views in 4 hours. Nathan watched the screen as their footage played, set to dramatic music. But it was the comments that made his breath catch. Thousands of them, all focused on the ring, on the story of a wife who'd thrown away her husband's legacy only to see it become the symbol of his greatest triumph. Someone had found Claire's social media. Within hours, the internet had connected every piece of the story. Her posts about Brandon, their engagement photos, her life of luxury while Nathan had been 3,000 feet underwater, proving that his dreams weren't pathetic, they were pioneering. Across town, in the pristine offices of Steele and Associates, Claire Donovan sat at her new desk, scrolling through her phone with hands that trembled slightly. Her carefully curated social media presence was being torn apart by strangers who'd found the ultimate karma story. Every photo she'd posted with Brandon, every caption about finally living the life I deserve, was now being viewed through the lens of spectacular poor judgment. The engagement ring Brandon had given her, 3 carats of flawless diamond, suddenly felt heavy on her finger. She'd posted about it just 2 weeks ago, the same day Nathan's first paper was published. She'd called it upgrading to the luxury I always deserved. The internet had not been kind about that timing. Her phone buzzed. Monica, her best friend, the one who'd encouraged her to leave Nathan, the one who'd celebrated when Claire got the ring she'd always wanted. "Have you seen the news?" Monica's text read. "Your ex-husband is everywhere. They're calling him a genius. That ring story. Claire, what have you done?" Claire closed her eyes, but she could still see the footage that was playing on every news channel. Nathan, in his submersible, looking exactly like the passionate researcher she'd fallen in love with a decade ago. The coral formations that proved he'd been right all along. The ring, her final act of cruelty, transformed into a symbol of his vindication. "Claire," Brandon appeared in her doorway, his expression tight. "We need to talk." She followed him into his private office, where his computer displayed the news story. Displayed her. Her social media posts were being dissected alongside footage of Nathan's discovery, creating a narrative that made her look like every shallow villain in every inspirational story ever told. "This is not good for the firm," Brandon said, his voice cold in a way she'd never heard before. "My partners are concerned about the attention." "I had no idea," Claire started, but Brandon cut her off. "That's the problem. You threw away something valuable because you couldn't see its worth. That's exactly the kind of judgment that concerns my partners." He paused, his next words careful. "I think we should postpone the engagement, just until this blows over." The diamond ring suddenly felt like it was burning her finger. "Brandon, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious. My reputation matters, Claire. And right now, you're associated with one of the most viral karma stories on the internet." He turned back to his computer, dismissing her. "Take some time off. Let this settle." Claire walked out of his office in a daze. The luxury she'd always wanted, the successful man she'd traded Nathan for, the life she'd convinced herself she deserved, all of it was crumbling because the universe had decided to prove her wrong in the most public way possible. That evening, she drove to Monterey without really deciding to. Her feet carried her down the same beach where she'd thrown away Nathan's ring, where she'd declared herself finally free. The waves rolled in with the same eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama. She saw him from a distance. Nathan stood at the water's edge, looking out at the ocean with the kind of peace she'd never seen on his face during their marriage. He'd always been tense around her, always trying to please her, always falling short of expectations she kept raising just out of his reach. Claire approached slowly, her heels sinking into the sand. Nathan turned as she got closer. Up close, she could see he looked different. Stronger somehow. The weight of trying to satisfy her had lifted, leaving behind someone who knew his own worth. "Hello, Claire. I saw the news," she said quietly. "Congratulations." "Thank you." The silence between them was vast. Claire looked at the ocean, at the place where she'd thrown away something irreplaceable. "I was wrong," she finally said. "About everything. About you, about your work, about what matters." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "You weren't wrong about what you wanted, Claire. You wanted money and status and a certain kind of life. Those aren't evil things to want. We just wanted different things. I threw away your grandfather's ring. I know." The ocean gave it back. He pulled the ring from his pocket. It was clean now, restored, gleaming in the fading light. It traveled 15 miles and sank 3,000 feet to land exactly where I needed to find it. If you hadn't thrown it away, I might not have the funding to continue my research. That ring became the proof that my work matters, that my obsession was justified, that the dreams you called pathetic were actually pioneering. Claire felt tears burn her eyes. "I destroyed us." "No," Nathan said gently. "We destroyed each other. You needed me to be someone I'm not. I needed you to love something you couldn't understand. Neither of us was wrong. We were just wrong for each other." Brandon called off the engagement. "I'm sorry." And the thing that hurt most was that she could tell he meant it. After everything, he still had kindness for her. Not love, not longing, just simple human compassion for someone he'd once cared about deeply. "The internet hates me," Claire said with a broken laugh. "I'm the villain in your success story." "That's not a story I'm telling," Nathan replied. "I did one interview about the discovery. I mentioned finding the ring. I never mentioned you. You didn't have to. They found everything." "People love a karma story," Nathan said. "But this isn't about karma, Claire. It's about two people who weren't right for each other. And sometimes the universe makes that very clear in dramatic ways." He looked at the ring in his palm. "I'm keeping this. Not because of what you did, but because of what it represents. My grandfather gave this to me and told me it would bring me to my true path. He was right. Just not in the way either of us expected." Claire watched him walk away, back up the beach toward a life that no longer included her, toward a future she'd never be part of. The waves whispered their eternal secrets, and somewhere in their rhythm, she heard the truth she'd been running from. She'd thrown away something precious, not understanding its worth. The ocean had returned it to the only person who recognized its value. And sometimes, that's exactly how karma works, not with anger or cruelty, but with perfect, poetic justice. 12 months after the ring washed back into Nathan's life, attached to the coral discovery that changed everything, he stood on the deck of a new research vessel. The Meridian II was 3 times the size of the original, funded by grants that poured in after his discovery went viral. Marcus stood beside him, grinning at the state-of-the-art equipment surrounding them. "Still can't believe this is real," Marcus said. 3 years ago we were scraping together pennies for fuel." Nathan smiled, looking out at the Pacific. His work had opened doors he'd never imagined. Universities were studying the regenerative properties of his coral. Medical researchers were exploring its potential compounds. His name was being mentioned for awards that used to feel like impossible dreams. But the best part wasn't the recognition. It was the freedom to do the work he loved without having to justify it to someone who would never understand. "Ready for the next dive?" Marcus asked. Nathan nodded. Somewhere 3,000 feet below, an entire ecosystem waited to reveal its secrets. An ecosystem that wouldn't exist in human knowledge if Claire hadn't thrown away his grandfather's ring, if he hadn't been forced to prove his worth to a world that doubted him. Sometimes, the universe gives you exactly what you need by taking away what you thought you wanted, Sometimes, the things we throw away come back transformed, and sometimes, declaring yourself finally free is the beginning of someone else's freedom story. Nathan slipped his grandfather's ring onto his finger, where it belonged, where it would stay as a reminder that worth isn't determined by those who can't see it. Then he descended once more into the depths, into the darkness that glowed with life, into the world that had always been his true home. Behind him, the waves continued their ancient rhythm, keeping secrets and revealing them, patient as only the ocean can be, waiting for those brave enough to listen. Viewers, Claire thought throwing away that ring would free her from Nathan's pathetic dreams. Instead, she freed him to achieve everything she said was impossible. Do you believe the universe has a way of correcting our mistakes? Do you think some acts of cruelty carry their own perfect punishment? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about karma, justice, and the unexpected ways the universe keeps its accounts balanced.